What if I told you that the most brilliant mind in America empties trash cans for a living? What if the person who could unlock the secrets of 29 lost civilizations is invisible to everyone around her? What if the woman who speaks languages that died before Christ was born has been cleaning the offices of people who think she's mentally unstable? Tonight, you'll discover how a janitor's whispered words in an ancient language shattered a millionaire's world and revealed a truth that will change how you see everyone you've ever overlooked. This is the story of Maya Jefferson, and by the end of tonight you'll understand why her secret left a powerful CEO speechless, and how her courage reminds us that wisdom has no expiration date, brilliance knows no uniform, and the most extraordinary people often hide in the most ordinary places. But Maya's story begins in the deepest shadows of invisibility. Picture this. It's 3:47 a.m. in Chicago. The city sleeps, but somewhere in a towering monument to human knowledge, a woman moves through darkness carrying conversations with the dead. Are you ready to discover what happens when 15 years of silence finally finds its voice? When hidden genius refuses to stay hidden, the most extraordinary awakening you've ever witnessed is about to begin. The Global Language Research Institute rises 23 floors into the Chicago skyline, like a modern Tower of Babel, a monument to human communication funded by tech billionaire Richard Callen. Its glass and steel structure houses humanity's greatest linguistic treasures, ancient manuscripts that predate written history, digital archives containing the last recordings of dying languages, research laboratories where artificial intelligence attempts to decode the voices of civilizations that vanished millennia ago. But tonight, while the city sleeps and the scholars dream, these halls belong to the invisible. Maya Jefferson, 41 years old, pushes her cleaning cart through corridors lined with linguistic artifacts worth more than most people's homes. Her footsteps echo softly on marble floors, the only sound in a building that during the day buzzes with the conversations of PhD linguists from Harvard, computational scientists from MIT, cultural anthropologists from Stanford. She moves like a ghost through these hallowed halls, grey uniform, quiet manner, eyes that seem to avoid contact with the few late-night researchers who occasionally notice her presence. To them, she's part of the building's infrastructure, as invisible and unimportant as the heating vents or security cameras. But watch her more carefully. Watch how she pauses before certain displays, how her fingers trace the air above ancient texts she's supposedly forbidden to touch. Watch how her lips move silently as she passes manuscripts in languages that most scholars need dictionaries to decipher. Tonight, she stops before a glass case containing a fragment of papyrus, Egyptian hieroglyphics from the Middle Kingdom, untranslated and mysterious. The placard reads, "Meaning unknown." Scholars believe it may be administrative records or religious text. Maya's eyes dance across the symbols like she's reading a love letter from an old friend. Her lips move silently, forming words that haven't been spoken aloud in 3,000 years. What the placard doesn't say, what the scholars don't know, is that this papyrus contains the personal diary of a woman named Nefertiti Merit, a scribe who lived during the reign of Amenemhat III. She wrote about her husband's snoring, her children's mischief, her mother-in-law's cooking advice, and her secret dream of becoming a priest despite social conventions that made such ambitions impossible for women. Maya knows this because Maya can read hieroglyphics the way most people read newspaper headlines, but she's never told anyone. How could she? Who would believe that a janitor carries ancient Egypt in her mind? You see, Maya Jefferson has a secret so extraordinary that when it's finally revealed, it will shatter everything everyone thought they knew about intelligence, age, education, and the invisible people society discards. For 15 years, she has been having conversations with history itself. For 15 years, she has been the repository of human voices that academia declared extinct. For 15 years, she has been brilliant, multilingual, and completely invisible. But invisibility, as Maya is about to discover, is not the same as silence. And silence, when it finally breaks, can change the world. Maya's apartment tells a story the world will never read. It's a small one-bedroom on Chicago's South Side, the kind of place where working people live quiet lives that don't make headlines or academic papers. But step inside, and you enter a universe that would make the world's greatest libraries weep with envy. Books everywhere. Thousands of them. Not the bestsellers you'd find in most homes, but volumes that whisper secrets from civilizations that fell before America was even imagined. Ancient Greek philosophical texts beside medieval Arabic poetry. Sanskrit manuscripts next to hieroglyphic dictionaries. Basque folk songs translated alongside Sumerian creation myths. They're stacked on every surface, spilling from overstuffed shelves, creating mountain ranges of forgotten knowledge across her living room floor. Most are library discards, books that institutions deemed outdated or too specialized for modern scholarship. Books that were destined for dumpsters until Maya rescued them, one volume at a time, over 15 years of invisible night shifts. Each book is a relationship. Each language is a friendship. Each text is a conversation partner that never judges, never dismisses, never tells her she's not qualified to understand. Each night, after her shift ends at 6 a.m., Maya sits by her window overlooking Lake Michigan. The city awakens below her. Rush hour traffic, school buses, the ordinary symphony of people beginning ordinary days. But Maya's day is ending, and she spends these precious hours before sleep traveling through time. Tonight she's reading Sappho in original Greek. Not a translation, the actual words the poet wrote on the island of Lesbos 2,600 years ago. Maya's lips move silently as she follows the ancient rhythms, understanding not just the meaning, but the music between the words. She whispers the ancient Greek words that speak of love as the loosener of limbs, a phrase so powerful and specific that it captures something English can never quite translate. Love once again shakes me, bittersweet, irresistible creature. Maya understands why Sappho chose such precise, evocative language instead of simpler words for desire. She feels the weight of bittersweet in ways that modern translations can never capture. She recognizes the sophisticated wordplay that makes this fragment poetry rather than mere description. Tomorrow she'll return to the Institute, where PhD scholars discuss Sappho in seminars, analyzing fragments they can barely pronounce. They'll debate meanings that Maya understands intuitively, propose interpretations that miss the emotional core she grasps immediately, but Maya will say nothing. She'll empty their wastebaskets and clean their whiteboards while they fumble through languages that live in her heart. Her neighbors think she's lonely. Her co-workers think she's strange. The world thinks she's nothing. But Maya Jefferson is having conversations with the greatest minds in human history. She's debating philosophy with Aristotle in Greek, discussing mathematics with Al-Khwarizmi in Arabic, exploring mysticism with Rumi in Persian, analyzing poetry with Li Bai in Chinese. She speaks to Homer about the rhythm of epic verse. She argues with Confucius about social harmony. She laughs with Aristophanes about the absurdities of academic pretension. These conversations happen in the silence of pre-dawn hours, in the space between sleeping and waking, in the sacred territory of a mind that refuses to be limited by other people's expectations, and tomorrow history is going to demand that Maya speak back. 7 a.m. at the Global Language Research Institute. The morning shift arrives like a parade of credentials and carefully constructed academic personas. They stride through marble lobbies in tailored suits, carrying laptops worth more than Maya's monthly salary, discussing research grants and publication deadlines with the casual authority of people who've never questioned their right to be heard. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the Institute's Director of Ancient Languages, sweeps past Maya's cleaning station without a glance. Her Hermes briefcase contains manuscripts that Maya could translate in her sleep, but Dr. Hartwell spent 6 years earning her PhD just to achieve basic competency in 3 ancient languages. Dr. Marcus Chen, the celebrated expert in dead dialects, steps around Maya's cart like it's furniture. His office walls display certificates from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, credentials that certify his authority to speak about languages that Maya dreams in, but that he studies like archaeological artifacts. Professor Sarah Williams, who wrote the definitive text on extinct Indo-European languages doesn't even register Maya's existence. She's too busy reviewing her notes for today's international presentation, preparing to discuss linguistic theories that Maya could expand and correct, but that Professor Williams presents as settled science. These scholars, brilliant in their own right, move through the institute like priests in a temple of knowledge. They've devoted their lives to understanding how humans communicate across time and culture, yet they cannot see the most extraordinary linguistic mind in their building because she wears a janitor's uniform instead of academic robes. But today, Maya pauses in her cleaning. Today, she notices something that makes her heart skip and her hands tremble. A display case has been prepared for tomorrow's international delegation. Artifacts from the ancient Basque civilization. Stone tablets covered in Euskera, the mysterious language that has puzzled scholars for centuries. The placard reads, Basque funerary inscriptions, circa 1400 CE, partial translations available. Full cultural context remains unknown. Maya stares at those tablets, her cleaning cloth forgotten in her hand. Her fingers trace the air above the glass, following the curves of letters that most linguistic experts can barely pronounce. But Maya sees more than letters. She sees the voices of people who refuse to let their language die, despite centuries of political suppression. She recognizes the dialectal variations that suggest these tablets come from different regions of the Basque country. She understands the grammatical structures that preserve pre-Indo-European thought patterns. She feels the cultural weight of funeral customs that connect these ancient people to their living descendants. And for just a moment, just one dangerous moment, her lips move silently, forming ancient Basque words that haven't been spoken fluently in over 500 years. She whispers what the tablets actually say. Here lies one who carried love in their heart and truth in their speech. Maya doesn't know it yet, but tomorrow, when the world's most important linguistic delegation arrives, these ancient words are going to escape her lips in front of people who can recognize their significance. Tomorrow, her secret is going to demand to be heard. Richard Callan didn't build a billion-dollar tech empire by being sentimental about human potential. At 55, he's conquered markets that others thought impenetrable, revolutionized industries that seemed unchangeable, and funded the Global Language Research Institute, not out of academic passion, but because he understands one fundamental truth that most businessmen miss: communication is the ultimate currency of power. His companies develop translation software that governments use for intelligence gathering, AI language models that corporations deploy for international negotiations, cultural bridge-building technologies that can mean the difference between successful partnerships and diplomatic disasters. But despite all his resources, despite hiring the world's brightest linguistic minds, despite investing $200 million in cutting-edge technology, there are still puzzles that resist his solutions, ancient languages that defeat digital decoding, cultural contexts that elude artificial intelligence, human nuances that slip through algorithmic nets like water through a sieve. This frustrates a man accustomed to solving everything with money, innovation, and strategic thinking. Tomorrow's delegation represents his biggest opportunity yet, a consortium of international investors and cultural preservationists who could fund his most ambitious project, a comprehensive digital archive of every language ever spoken by humanity. Not just modern languages, but ancient dialects, extinct tongues, and cultural communications that exist only in fragments and scholarly speculation. The potential is staggering. Imagine AI that could decode Linear A, software that could translate undeciphered Mayan glyphs, algorithms that could reconstruct lost languages from scattered remnants. The applications would revolutionize archaeology, anthropology, and international relations. Richard has spent millions assembling what he believes is the world's finest linguistic team. He's recruited scholars whose names appear in every major academic journal. He's invested in technology that other institutions can't afford. He's created an environment where linguistic genius should flourish. But he's about to discover that the most extraordinary linguistic mind in his building The person who could unlock every puzzle that has frustrated his experts has been emptying his wastebaskets for 15 years. The woman who could make his digital archive project possible with insights that no AI could replicate has been invisible to him because she cleans floors instead of publishing papers. Tomorrow, when international investors arrive expecting to see the future of linguistic scholarship, Richard Callan will discover that the future has been mopping his floors, organizing his libraries, and carrying 29 languages in her head while the world treated her like she didn't exist. That evening, Maya sits in the Institute's library after hours, surrounded by the silence that has been her companion for 15 years. She's finished her cleaning duties, but something keeps her here tonight, drawn to the Basque display case. Like a moth to ancient flame, the security guard, Sam Rodriguez, one of the few people who's ever spoken to her with genuine kindness, finds her there during his rounds. Working late again, Maya. His voice carries the warmth of someone who recognizes shared invisibility. She looks up, startled but not frightened. Sam is part of the Institute's invisible infrastructure too, a night security guard whose presence is noticed only when something goes wrong. Just appreciating the artifacts, she says softly. Sam peers at the stone tablets, his weathered face thoughtful. Beautiful, aren't they? Too bad nobody can really read them anymore. Dr. Hartwell says they've got basic translations, but the deeper meanings are lost forever. Maya's fingers press against the glass and her voice is barely audible. Not lost, just sleeping. Sam nods, understanding something in her tone that he can't quite name. You know, Maya, I've watched you work here for years. You see things differently than the day shift folks. Sometimes I wonder what you're thinking when you look at all these old books and artifacts. For a moment, Maya considers telling him. Sam wouldn't judge her or demand credentials. He might even understand how someone could love languages that the world has forgotten. But 15 years of invisibility have taught her caution. Instead, she says, I think about the people who wrote these words, how they lived, what they loved, what they hoped someone would remember about them. That night, Maya dreams in languages. She dreams of Basque shepherds singing to their flocks in valleys older than Rome. She dreams of merchants trading stories along with goods, their words weaving threads that connected mountain villages to coastal ports. She dreams of grandmothers whispering lullabies that carried the heartbeat of a people who refused to let their language die. And when she wakes at 3:30 a.m., Maya Jefferson knows that today will be different. Today, the wise, sleeping languages want to wake up. Today, after 15 years of silence, she's going to speak. She doesn't know that in 6 hours her voice will shatter the assumptions of 40 brilliant minds. She doesn't know that her words will expose the limitations of academic institutions. She doesn't know that her courage will inspire a revolution in how the world understands human knowledge. She only knows that today, the languages she carries refuse to stay silent. Today, Maya Jefferson is going to remember that brilliance doesn't require permission to exist. 10 a.m. sharp, the Global Language Research Institute transforms into a showcase of intellectual prestige. International delegates stream through the lobby, distinguished professors from Oxford, linguistic researchers from the Sorbonne, cultural preservation specialists from UNESCO, and investors whose checkbooks could change the future of human communication. The entrance resembles a United Nations assembly. Dr. Kenji Nakamura from Tokyo University, the world's leading expert in ancient Japanese dialects. Professor Fatima Al-Zahra from Cairo, who deciphered the last remaining Coptic manuscripts. Dr. Lars Eriksson from Stockholm, whose work on Old Norse has revolutionized Viking historical understanding. Each scholar represents decades of academic achievement, millions in research funding, and reputations that could make or break international linguistic policy. Richard Callan, immaculate in his Italian suit, orchestrates the event like a symphony, conductor managing a $200 million performance. Every detail perfect, every presentation polished. His team of expert linguists positioned strategically throughout the building, ready to demonstrate their mastery of humanity's linguistic Heritage? The stakes couldn't be higher. This consortium controls funding that could establish his institute as the premier linguistic research center in the world. Maya pushes her cart to the edges of the gathering, invisible as always. But today, she notices something different. Today, her heart pounds with each language she overhears. French conversations between Parisian academics discussing the cultural implications of digital language preservation. German debates about funding, allocations, and the ethics of commercializing ancient knowledge. Spanish discussions about the responsibilities of Western institutions toward indigenous linguistic heritage. Each language she understands perfectly, each word clear as her native English, each conversation revealing layers of meaning, cultural context, and emotional subtext that the speakers assume only their linguistic peers can comprehend. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell begins the formal presentation in the main conference room, her voice carrying the authority of 20 years in linguistic academia. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to humanity's greatest linguistic repository. Today you'll witness the cutting-edge intersection of ancient wisdom and modern technology. Our digital archives contain over 3,000 documented languages. Our AI translation systems can process 847 linguistic variants, and our cultural preservation protocols meet the highest international standards. But Maya isn't listening to Dr. Hartwell's rehearsed presentation. She's listening to something far more urgent, a conversation happening near the back of the room. Two delegates speaking in hushed, frustrated tones, their words flowing in a language that makes her breath catch and her heart race with recognition. They're speaking Euskera, ancient Basque. Not the modern, standardized version taught in universities, but the archaic dialectal form that predates Roman influence, carries pre-Indo-European structures, and holds cultural memories from when Europe was a very different world. And they're deeply frustrated. Their official translator, a promising young grad student from the University of the Basque Country, sweating despite the air conditioning, is struggling desperately. The delegates are discussing the stone tablets displayed in the presentation, but their words carry nuances, emotional depths, and cultural contexts that the translator is missing completely. He understands individual words, but misses the music between them, the cultural rhythms that give Basque its soul. The delegation's key investor, Dr. Mikel Etxeberria from Bilbao, a man whose family foundation controls $50 million in cultural preservation funding, shakes his head in profound disappointment. His Basque words carry centuries of cultural pain and protective fury. These Americans collect our artifacts like museum pieces, but they cannot hear our ancestors' voices. They see symbols where we see souls. Maya's hands tighten on her, cleaning cart until her knuckles turn white. For the first time in years, she feels something powerful stirring inside her chest. Not fear, not shame, but awakening. The same electric recognition she gets when reading ancient texts alone in her apartment, but amplified 100-fold by the presence of living speakers whose heritage is being misunderstood in real time. The feeling of languages calling to her across time, demanding to be heard, refusing to let cultural bridges collapse due to inadequate translation. Dr. Etxeberria continues, his frustration building. How can we trust them to preserve our language and culture if they don't understand what the word home means to a Basque person? It's not just a building, it's where the heart lives. The young translator's face reddens as he realizes he's losing control of the situation. He whispers urgently to Dr. Hartwell, gesturing helplessly at his notes and electronic dictionaries. The presentation continues, but the Basque translation crisis is becoming a full-scale diplomatic disaster. Dr. Etxeberria grows increasingly frustrated as nuanced cultural concepts get reduced to clumsy approximations that strip away centuries of meaning. The young translator sweats profusely, consulting dictionaries and smartphone apps, but the ancient stone tablets might as well be hieroglyphics written in a fever dream. Richard Callan notices the commotion spreading through the back rows like wildfire. His jaw tightens. This delegation represents not just a $50 million opportunity, but his reputation as someone who can deliver on impossible promises. If he can't even provide adequate translation services for the world's linguistic experts, How can he claim to be preserving humanity's linguistic heritage? Dr. Hartwell attempts damage control, her voice taking on a slightly desperate edge. Perhaps we should move on to our digital archives, where our AI systems can provide more comprehensive— No! Dr. Etzeberia's voice cuts through the room like a blade. His English carries a heavy accent, but his meaning is crystal clear and razor-sharp. These tablets tell the story of my people. If you cannot read them properly, if you cannot hear what our ancestors actually said, how can we trust you to preserve them? How can we give you millions to protect something you cannot even understand? Silence falls over the conference room like a heavy curtain. 40 of the world's most distinguished linguistic scholars, each with impressive credentials and decades of experience, and none can bridge this ancient gap. The failure isn't just academic, it's deeply personal, cultural, spiritual. Dr. Nakamura whispers to his colleague, "This is extremely embarrassing." Professor Al-Zahra murmurs to her assistant, "This shows that the West still doesn't understand what cultural translation means." The tension in the room becomes suffocating. Reputations crumbling, deals dissolving. Years of preparation, unraveling in real time. That's when Maya Jefferson makes the decision that will change everything. Not boldly, not dramatically, not with the confidence of someone who's ever been listened to in rooms like this. Just forward. One trembling step, then another, her cleaning cart forgotten behind her like a discarded shell of her former invisible self. "Excuse me," she says softly, her voice barely audible above the hum of air conditioning and whispered conversations. Heads turn slowly, as if drawn by gravity rather than curiosity. Eyes narrow with confusion and annoyance. Who is this woman in the janitor's uniform interrupting their scholarly crisis? How did building maintenance get past security? Doesn't she understand that millions of dollars and international reputations hang in the balance? Dr. Hartwell's face flushes with embarrassment and anger. "Ma'am, this is a private academic gathering. If there's a maintenance issue, please." Contact, but Maya's eyes aren't looking at Dr. Hartwell. They're fixed on Dr. Echeberria with an intensity that stops the room cold. And when she speaks, her words flow like water over ancient stones, like wind through mountain valleys, where shepherds once sang songs that are now nearly forgotten. Your ancestors are not dead. Their words still live in these stones, and I can hear their voices. The room goes completely, utterly silent. Dr. Exeberia's eyes widen as if he's seeing a ghost, not a frightening spectre, but the ghost of something precious he thought was lost forever. The Basque delegates lean forward in their chairs, their faces reflecting wonder and disbelief. Even Richard Callan stops mid-gesture, his phone halfway to his ear, frozen in the realization that something unprecedented is happening in his conference room, because Maya Jefferson, the invisible janitor, the woman who empties their wastebaskets and cleans their whiteboards, just spoke perfect, fluent, archaic Basque, with an accent that suggests deep familiarity with regional dialectal variations that most university-trained Basque scholars couldn't identify, let alone reproduce. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. Then Dr. Exeberia rises from his chair slowly, his hand pressed to his heart, his voice carrying a mixture of shock and something deeper, recognition, perhaps even reverence. How do you know our language so deeply? That's my grandmother's dialect, from the Basque provinces. Dr. Exeberia rises from his chair slowly, his face a mixture of shock and something deeper, recognition, perhaps even reverence. He responds in rapid, complex Basque, testing this impossible woman who appeared from nowhere like an answered prayer. How do you know our language so deeply? It's not just knowing words, you understand the music of our heart. Where did you learn? Who did you speak with? What is your story? Maya's response flows without hesitation. Each word, perfectly pronounced, culturally contextualized, emotionally authentic. All languages are siblings. Learn one deeply, and the others come home. But Basque is special. This is Europe's first heart song. Your ancestors' voices live in me. Their stories come to my dreams. The Basque delegates begin whispering excitedly among themselves, their voices overlapping in rapid-fire Basque that sounds like music after the stilted mechanical translation attempts they've endured all morning. Dr. Hartwell's mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. The other linguistic scholars exchange bewildered glances. Who is this woman, and how does she speak a language that most of them need reference books to understand? But Dr. Echevarria isn't finished testing. His eyes narrow as he switches to an even more archaic form, a dialect so old that it predates written Basque literature. You have ancient knowledge, but how can you prove you're not a fraud? Maya's answer comes not in words but in song. She begins to chant in a rhythm that seems to come from the earth itself, her voice carrying melodies that predate Christianity in Europe. She sings an ancient lullaby. The mountains echo back, the sea answers, the old stones remember our ancestors' first prayers. Dr. Echevarria's eyes fill with tears. His voice breaks as he whispers, My grandmother sang that song to me when I was a small child. How is this possible? Richard Callan sets down his phone, his business mind struggling to process what he's witnessing. For the first time in years, something has captured his complete attention that isn't a profit margin or market analysis. This isn't just linguistic ability. It's cultural resurrection happening in real time. Ma'am, he says, his voice carrying new respect mixed with barely controlled excitement. I'm Richard Callan, owner of this institute. May I ask, who are you? Maya's hands tremble slightly. She spent so many years in the shadows that standing in this spotlight feels like staring directly into the sun. But Dr. Echevarria nods encouragingly, his eyes still wet with tears from hearing his grandmother's lullaby sung by a stranger who somehow carries his family's musical DNA. My name is Maya Jefferson. I work here. I clean the libraries. The silence that follows is deafening. 40 brilliant minds trying to process the impossible. Their janitor speaks ancient Basque fluently. Their cleaning woman understands cultural nuances that elude their PhDs. The invisible service worker who's been moving through their halls for years carries linguistic treasures in her mind that would make career reputations. Dr. Hartwell sputters, her world crashing down around her. This is highly irregular. We should return to our scheduled presentation. But Richard Callan holds up his hand, his businessman's instincts screaming that he's witnessing something that could redefine not just linguistics, but human potential itself. Ms. Jefferson, he says carefully, his voice carrying the weight of momentous decision. How many languages do you speak? Maya looks around the room, at the scholars who've dismissed her for years, at the delegates who now watch her with wonder, at the CEO, whose world is about to expand in ways he never imagined. And then, quietly, she delivers the line that will change everything. I stopped counting after 29. The conference room erupts, not in applause, in skepticism, whispers, barely concealed accusations flying through the air like bullets. Voices rising, in 6 different languages, as delegates and scholars struggle to process this claim that challenges everything they thought they knew about language acquisition, cultural competence, and human cognitive limits. The conference room erupts in chaos, not organized applause, raw, unfiltered disruption, as 40 distinguished minds struggle to process what they've just witnessed. Dr. Marcus Chen, the Institute's expert in dead dialects, rises from his chair with barely concealed fury. 29 languages. That's not just improbable, it's impossible for someone without formal institutional training. I have 3 PhDs from Harvard, Yale, and Oxford, speak 12 languages, and I barely consider myself fluent in 8. This is either an elaborate hoax, or we're witnessing a case of severe psychological delusion. Professor Sarah Williams crosses her arms, her voice dripping with academic condescension. This is clearly some kind of theatrical performance. Perhaps she's memorized key phrases to impress people. Street performers and con artists use similar techniques to fool tourists in European capitals. Dr. Chen continues his assault. The cognitive load required for true fluency in 29 languages would exceed human neurological capacity. The maintenance requirements alone, the constant practice needed to retain active vocabulary, grammatical structures, and cultural contextual understanding would require 16 to 18 hours per day of linguistic engagement. Professor Williams adds, and where's the documentation? Academic transcripts, published papers, peer reviews, language certifications. In our field, competence without credentials is simply unverifiable amateur enthusiasm. But, Doctor, Etcheberria isn't listening to the scholar's academic jealousy. He's watching Maya's face, reading something in her expression that institutional credentials can't fake, the deep peace that comes from living inside languages rather than just studying them, the cultural fluidity that can't be memorized from textbooks. He speaks again, this time switching to Arabic with deliberate challenge. Do you speak Arabic as well? Or is this just a pre-programmed performance for impression? Maya responds without missing a beat, her Arabic flowing with classical elegance. Yes, but not just contemporary Arabic. I speak classical Arabic from the time of Ibn Battuta and Ibn Khaldun and Al-Jahiz. The Arabic that carried philosophy and mathematics and medicine through Al-Andalus to Europe. Now the Arabic-speaking delegates gasp audibly. She didn't just answer. She referenced specific historical figures and demonstrated knowledge of Arabic's role in medieval intellectual transmission. Dr. Amina Hassan from Cairo leans forward, her eyes widening. She knows about Al-Jahiz, his work on linguistic theory from the 9th century. Richard Callan's eyes narrow, but not with suspicion, with recognition. He's built his fortune on identifying hidden value where others see only surface, and every instinct tells him he's looking at something unprecedented and priceless. Ms. Jefferson, he says, his tone shifting to something resembling awe mixed with business calculation, would you be willing to demonstrate your abilities more comprehensively, under controlled conditions? Maya's fear battles with something stronger, a lifetime of knowledge demanding acknowledgement, 15 years of silence demanding voice. She nods slowly, her voice barely audible. What do you want me to do? Dr. Hartwell objects desperately, sensing her authority crumbling. Richard, this is highly unprofessional. We have a schedule, international protocols, established academic procedures. Cancel everything, Richard says flatly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to rewriting rules when opportunity presents itself. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're about to witness something that will redefine our understanding of human linguistic capacity. Dr. Chen steps forward, his academic pride wounded and dangerous. Fine. If Ms. Jefferson claims such extraordinary abilities, let her prove them. But I insist on rigorous testing, random selections, no preparation times, independent verification. Professor Williams nods aggressively. And if she fails even one test, this entire charade ends immediately. Academic integrity demands nothing less. Maya looks around, the room at faces that have shifted from wonder to suspicion to outright hostility. She sees Dr. Hartwell's satisfied smirk, anticipating failure. She sees Richard Callan's worried expression, his investment in her success now dangerously visible. She sees international delegates who feel manipulated and betrayed. For a moment, it seems like she might break under the pressure, might flee back to her cart and her shadows and her safe invisibility. But then something changes in her expression. Something that's been buried for 15 years begins to surface. Not just knowledge, but dignity. Not just ability, but the fundamental right to be acknowledged for who she really is. Her voice, when it comes, carries new strength that silences the room. I accept your tests, all of them. But I have one condition. Dr. Hartwell smirks. You're hardly in a position to make conditions. Maya looks directly at her tormentor. When I prove what I can do, you'll stop pretending that credentials matter more than competence. You'll stop acting like institutional approval is the only path to knowledge, and you'll start asking better questions about who you've been overlooking. What follows is nothing short of miraculous. Maya Jefferson transforms from invisible janitor to linguistic virtuoso in front of 40 of the world's most distinguished scholars. But the transformation goes deeper than simple translation. She, becomes a conduit for languages that have been waiting 15 years to find their voice again. Dr. Chen challenges her first with Sanskrit, producing a palm leaf manuscript from the 12th century that has never been fully translated. Maya approaches it like she's greeting an old lover returned from war. Her fingers hover over the ancient script, and when she speaks, her voice carries the rhythm of Vedic hymns. This is from the Katha Upanishad, but not the version most scholars know. This is commentary by an unnamed female philosopher. You can tell by the grammatical structures she uses, the way she declines certain nouns. She's arguing against traditional interpretations of consciousness, claiming that individual awareness and universal consciousness aren't the same thing. They're dance partners. Dr. Rajesh Sharma from Delhi University nearly falls from his chair. The gendered grammatical analysis. I've never seen anyone pass Sanskrit that way. And the philosophical interpretation, it's completely original but textually sound. Professor Williams tests her with Middle Egyptian hieroglyphics, presenting her with a papyrus fragment that has puzzled Egyptologists for decades. Maya reads it like morning headlines, her voice taking on the cadence of ancient Egyptian storytelling. This isn't a funerary text like everyone assumed. It's a divorce document, probably the oldest divorce decree in human history. A woman named Nefertiti Ankh, not the famous queen, just a woman with the same name, is legally separating from her husband because he, and I quote, snores like a hippopotamus and smells like fermented fish. The room erupts in surprised laughter, despite the tension. Dr. Sarah Collins from the British Museum gasps, the colloquial Middle Egyptian, the legal terminology, this would revolutionize our understanding of ancient Egyptian family law. Dr. Etziberria asks her to interpret a complex Basque funeral song that has been untranslatable for centuries. Maya's voice becomes haunting, otherworldly as she chants the ancient melody, then translates, "Here lies one who spoke to mountains and rivers listened. Here lies one who sang songs that made ancient stones weep. Here lies one whose words will outlive her bones." Dr. Etziberria's eyes fill with tears. That is exactly what it says. But how could you know? We've studied this tablet for 30 years. The grammatical structure you used, it's from a dialect that died out in the 15th century. But it's more than just translation. Maya explains cultural contexts that would take scholars years to research. She describes the emotional weight behind ancient idioms. She connects linguistic patterns across civilizations separated by continents and centuries. This Sumerian word for home, she says, pointing to cuneiform tablets, shares structural DNA with modern Finnish and Hungarian words for dwelling. The migrations of language follow the migrations of human hearts. People carry words for the things they love most. One by one, the skeptical scholars fall silent. Dr. Chen's challenges become increasingly desperate. Old Norse sagas that Maya recites with the rhythm of a Viking storyteller, Akkadian royal correspondence that she translates with knowledge of court protocols, ancient Hebrew prophetic texts that she renders with understanding of mystical traditions that most rabbinical scholars don't possess. Each language doesn't just pass through her, it inhabits her, transforms her posture, changes her very presence. When she speaks Latin, she carries the authority of Caesar's historians. When she recites Greek, she sparkles with Aristophanes' wit. When she chants in Sanskrit, she embodies the depth of ancient philosophers. The delegates lean forward, mesmerized. They're not just hearing translations, they're witnessing resurrections. Dead languages breathing again through Maya's voice, carrying cultural memories that academia had declared lost forever. Richard Callan watches it all with growing amazement, his business mind calculating the impossible value of what he's witnessing. Not just linguistic ability, but cultural bridge building on a scale that could revolutionize international communication, diplomatic relations, and human understanding itself. But Dr. Hartwell isn't finished. Her academic reputation is crumbling. With each successful demonstration, and desperate people make dangerous choices. But miracles make some people uncomfortable. And in academic circles, the impossible is often treated as impossible fraud, especially when it threatens the established order of intellectual hierarchy. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell watches Maya's demonstration with growing horror, not at Maya's deception, but at her own inadequacy being exposed in real time. For 20 years, Hartwell has been considered the Institute's premier ancient language expert. She's published 63 papers, won 17 grants totaling $8.4 million, built her reputation on being the woman who could unlock humanity's linguistic past. Her office walls are covered with certificates, awards, honorary degrees. She's keynoted conferences in 12 countries. Graduate students compete to work under her supervision. Publishers fight over her manuscript proposals, and now a janitor is making her look like a first-year graduate student stumbling through her qualifying exams. As Maya finishes her stunning interpretation of the funeral tablet, Dr. Hartwell steps forward with the calculated precision of a predator who has been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ladies and gentlemen, I must protest in the strongest possible terms. What we're witnessing is either the most elaborate hoax in academic history, or in she pauses, her voice dripping with manufactured concern and barely concealed malice. We're expected to believe that a cleaning woman with no documented education has somehow mastered languages that require decades of formal study, institutional resources, and peer-reviewed methodology. Professor Marcus Chen nods vigorously, his wounded pride finding alliance with Hartwell's attack. Dr. Hartwell raises the fundamental question of academic integrity. Linguistic acquisition at this level requires structured learning environments, systematic methodology, qualified instruction, and continuous scholarly engagement. No one simply learns 29 languages through casual reading, regardless of natural ability. Dr. Hartwell presses her advantage like a prosecutor who has finally found the weakness in an opponent's case. Moreover, the patterns Ms. Jefferson has demonstrated suggest either unprecedented genius, which would be documented somewhere in our educational systems, or sophisticated preparation specifically designed to deceive this exact audience. Professor Williams stands up, her voice carrying institutional authority. I've spent 35 years studying extinct Indo-European languages. The cultural contextualizations Ms. Jefferson provided suggest access to primary sources, unpublished manuscripts, and oral traditions that are simply not available outside major research universities. How does a janitor gain access to materials that require special permits and institutional affiliations? The international delegates begin whispering among themselves, doubt creeping into their earlier wonder. Dr. Nakamura murmurs to his colleague, "The demonstrations were impressive, but the circumstances are unusual." Professor Alzara frowns. In academic circles, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Dr. Hartwell recognizes the shifting mood and strikes harder. I'm not making accusations lightly, but we have professional obligations to our institutions, to our funders, to the integrity of linguistic scholarship itself. If we cannot verify competence through standard academic channels, how can we distinguish between authentic expertise and elaborate performance art? Maya feels the room's energy shifting like a tide going out, leaving her exposed and vulnerable on empty sand. The faces that showed wonder 10 minutes ago now reflect suspicion, skepticism, and growing hostility. The scholars who were mesmerized by her abilities now seem embarrassed by their own gullibility. Richard Callan watches this transformation with growing alarm. His business instincts recognize a reputation-destroying scandal in formation. If Maya is exposed as a fraud, his entire enterprise could collapse. Investors would flee. International partnerships would dissolve. His carefully constructed empire would crumble. Dr. Hartwell delivers what she believes will be the killing blow. I formally request a comprehensive examination under controlled conditions. If Ms. Jefferson is truly what she claims, she should have no problem submitting to rigorous academic testing with independent oversight and verification protocols. The academic wolves circle closer. Professor Chen adds, blind testing, random language selection, no preparation time, multiple independent examiners, complete documentation of educational background and learning methodology. Professor, Williams drives another nail, and full academic transparency, published credentials, peer references, institutional affiliation, academic genealogy. In our field, competence without credible documentation is simply unverifiable amateur enthusiasm or elaborate deception. Dr. Hartwell's voice becomes surgical in its cruelty, because, frankly, what we've witnessed today challenges every established principle of language acquisition, cognitive psychology, and educational methodology. Either Ms. Jefferson represents a complete revolution in our understanding of human learning capacity, which would be the discovery of the century, or we're being systematically deceived by someone with unclear motives and questionable psychological stability. Maya shrinks back as if physically struck. The woman who just resurrected dead languages becomes the invisible janitor again, overwhelmed by the accusation and suspicion in 40 pairs of increasingly hostile eyes. But Richard Callan sees something different in her retreat, not guilt, but terror. The terror of someone whose greatest treasure is about to be dissected by people who fundamentally cannot recognize its value. Dr. Hartwell presses her advantage like a prosecutor who has finally cornered a defendant with no escape route. I propose a formal examination tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., 10 randomly selected languages, including several that are completely extinct and have never been successfully reconstructed by modern scholarship. Written translations, oral presentations, cultural context explanations, and etymological analysis, all monitored by a panel of independent experts with no connection to this institution. The academic wolves circle with bloodthirsty precision. Professor Chen adds with barely concealed glee, and we'll need complete documentation of her educational background, references from previous instructors, evidence of how she acquired these alleged abilities, and psychological evaluation to rule out delusional disorders or savant syndrome manifestations. Professor Williams delivers the bureaucratic coup de grace. Academic credentials must be verified through official transcripts. Language certifications must be authenticated through recognized testing bodies. Any gaps in educational documentation must be explained through sworn affidavits and institutional verification. Dr. Hartwell's smile grows predatory. We'll also require demonstration of active maintenance protocols. How does one maintain fluency in 29 languages without constant practice partners, immersive environments, and ongoing scholarly engagement? The cognitive science literature suggests such maintenance would require full-time dedication. The examination requirements become a wall of impossibility designed to crush rather than evaluate. Time limits, written examinations, oral assessments, cultural competency testing, historical accuracy verification, grammatical precision analysis, phonetic authenticity evaluation. Maya's face goes pale as she realizes the trap being constructed around her. Documentation, references. Her entire learning journey happened in shadows, alone with books and ancient voices that spoke to her across centuries. She has no professors to vouch for her, no degrees to brandish, no institutional affiliations to protect her. Her educational background is a landscape of destruction, career sabotage, academic blacklisting, institutional betrayal. The very system now demanding credentials is the same system that destroyed her credibility 15 years ago. Dr. Echevarria stands up angrily, his voice carrying protective fury. This is persecution, not examination. I've witnessed authentic fluency today that cannot be faked or memorized. The woman speaks my ancestral language better than my own grandmother did, with dialectal accuracy that suggests generational transmission. But the American academics have momentum now, and academic mob mentality is a dangerous force. Dr. Williams declares with righteous authority, academic integrity demands verification. We cannot simply accept extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. The reputation of linguistic scholarship itself is at stake. Professor Chen drives the point home. If Ms. Jefferson cannot provide standard academic documentation, we must consider alternative explanations, elaborate preparation, psychological disorders, or deliberate fraud designed to manipulate this specific audience for unknown purposes. The room buzzes with tension as 40 brilliant minds split into camps, those who witnessed something extraordinary and those who refuse to believe extraordinary things can happen outside institutional frameworks. Richard Callan recognizes the moment of truth, not just for Maya, but for his entire enterprise and reputation. If she's genuine, she represents the linguistic discovery of the century and a revolution in human learning potential. If she's a fraud, his reputation could be destroyed for allowing this spectacle to unfold in his institution. His business instincts war with his intuition. His legal advisors would counsel caution. His investors would demand verification. His reputation depends on making the right choice. He makes his decision with the calculated risk-taking that built his empire. Ms. Jefferson, would you be willing to submit to this examination under the conditions Dr. Hartwell has outlined? Maya looks around the room, at faces that have shifted from wonder to suspicion to outright hostility, at colleagues who've worked alongside her for years without ever really seeing her, at academics whose careers depend on being the smartest, people in their rooms. For a moment, she seems ready to flee, to return to her cleaning cart, her invisible life, her safe shadows where languages whisper but never demand public proof. The silence stretches until it becomes unbearable. Hartwell's satisfied smirk suggests she's already won. The international delegates look embarrassed and betrayed. Richard Callan's worried expression reveals how much his reputation now depends on her answer. But then something fundamental changes in Maya's expression. Something that's been buried for 15 years begins to surface. Not just knowledge, but dignity. Not just ability, but the right to be acknowledged for who she really is. Not just competence, but courage. Her voice, when it comes, carries new strength that cuts through the academic noise like steel through silk. I accept your challenge, all of it. Every test, every requirement, every attempt to diminish what I know. Dr. Hartwell's smile widens with anticipation. Excellent. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. 10 languages chosen by lottery from a list of extinct and endangered dialects, including 3 that are completely undeciphered and have never been successfully reconstructed by contemporary scholarship. Maya nods slowly, her fear transforming into something more dangerous. Resolve. I'll be here. Dr. Hartwell delivers the final challenge. And Ms. Jefferson, understand that this examination will be recorded, documented, and reviewed by the international linguistic community. If you fail, if you cannot meet these standards, your claims will be permanently discredited, and this institution's reputation will be protected from future misunderstandings. Maya meets her gaze directly. Dr. Hartwell, I've been destroyed by silence for 15 years. Tomorrow I find out what truth sounds like when it's finally allowed to speak. As the room begins to buzz with anticipation and gossip, Richard Callan approaches Maya quietly. Ms. Jefferson, are you absolutely certain about this? These people are looking for any excuse to destroy you. The examination they've designed isn't meant to evaluate. It's meant to annihilate. Maya looks at him with eyes that suddenly seem ancient, wise, tired of hiding. Mr. Callan, I've been destroyed before. But tomorrow I'm not just defending my abilities. I'm defending every person who's ever been told their knowledge doesn't count because it wasn't acquired in the right way. That night, Maya sits in her apartment surrounded by her books. 29 languages worth of human conversation stretching across her living room like archaeological layers of her soul. Each text a witness to her journey, each language a relationship built in solitude, each page a conversation with voices that most of the world has forgotten. But tonight, the books feel different. Tonight, they feel like evidence in a trial where the verdict has already been decided by judges who profit from her failure. She picks up her original notebook, the weathered journal where she first started recording linguistic patterns, 15 years ago as a disgraced academic working night shifts to survive. The pages are yellow now, filled with her careful handwriting tracking connections, between Sanskrit and Latin, Arabic and Hebrew, Basque and everything that predates Indo-European dominance. The notebook takes her back to another life when she was Dr. Maya Jefferson, assistant professor of comparative linguistics at Northwestern University, when she had an office with a window overlooking Lake Michigan, when she published papers that challenged conventional wisdom, when she taught eager graduate students who hung on her every word, when she believed the academic world valued knowledge over politics, substance over status, truth over institutional convenience, until the day she published her groundbreaking paper, connecting Proto-Indo-European roots to previously unstudied African language families, research that suggested human linguistic evolution followed patterns that contradicted 50 years of established scholarship dominated by European perspectives, until Dr. Martin Ashford, department head and gatekeeper of linguistic orthodoxy, accused her of fabricating connections and promoting unscientific theories that compromise academic integrity, until the whisper campaign that questioned her methodology, her sources, her very sanity. Jefferson's work is politically motivated, they said. She's trying to insert African contributions where none exist. Her research methodology is compromised by ideological bias, until the budget cuts that eliminated her position, cuts that mysteriously affected only junior faculty, whose research challenged senior professors' life work, until the blacklisting that made her name poison in academic circles nationwide, a brilliant young professor transformed into an unemployable pariah whose expertise became a liability. Maya closes the notebook and looks out at Lake Michigan, the same view she had from her office window 15 years ago. Tomorrow she faces the same system that destroyed her once before, the same institutional machinery that values credentials over competence, politics over truth. But this time she won't be presenting theories, she'll be demonstrating truth. This time she won't be asking for acceptance, she'll be demanding recognition. This time she won't be hoping for approval, she'll be insisting on acknowledgement. She picks up her phone and does something she hasn't done in 15 years. She calls her sister in California. "Eleanor, it's Maya. Yes, I know it's late. Listen carefully. Tomorrow I'm going to speak again, really speak. For the first time since Northwestern, I'm going to stop hiding and start fighting." Elena's voice carries 15 years of worry. "Maya, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. Tomorrow I'm going to prove that knowledge doesn't require permission from people who've never lived your experience. I'm going to show them that brilliance doesn't need institutional approval to be real." Maya hangs up and walks to her bookshelf, selecting 29 texts, one for each language she carries. She arranges them in a circle around her living room like a protective barrier, like ancient stones marking sacred ground. Tonight she reads not for learning, but for strength. Tonight each language whispers encouragement across centuries. We have survived empires falling. We have outlasted kings and kingdoms. We will survive academic politics. We will speak through you tomorrow. As dawn approaches, Maya Jefferson prepares for the battle of her life, not just for her reputation, but for the right of unconventional knowledge to exist in a world that demands conventional proof. 9 a.m. sharp. The Institute's main conference room has been transformed into an examination chamber that resembles more a courtroom than an academic venue. Dr. Hartwell presides like a judge anticipating a guilty verdict, flanked by 5 independent linguistic experts from other universities, scholars with no investment in the Institute's politics, brought in to ensure objectivity but clearly briefed on the expected outcome. The examination panel reads like a who's who of academic intimidation. Dr. Patricia Morgan from Yale, whose work on dead languages has set international standards. Professor Heinrich Müller from Max Planck Institute, whose cognitive linguistics research defines human learning limits. Dr. Priya Sharma from Oxford, whose computational language analysis reveals fraud through statistical patterns. Dr. James Morrison from Harvard, whose forensic linguistics has exposed academic deception in 12 countries. Professor Marie Dubois from the Sorbonne, whose methodology standards have ended careers. Maya enters wearing not her janitor's uniform, but a simple black dress, the same dress she wore to job interviews 15 years ago, when the world still acknowledged her expertise. But now it feels like funeral attire, mourning clothes for the academic death she's about to suffer. Richard Callan watches from the back of the room, his entire $50 million deal hanging on the outcome of this morning. His legal team has advised him to distance himself from Maya if the examination goes badly. His investors have threatened to pull funding if his institution becomes associated with academic fraud. His reputation as someone who can identify authentic value is about to be tested in the most public way possible. Dr. Hartwell announces the rules with prosecutorial precision designed to ensure failure. 10 languages, randomly selected from a pool of extinct and endangered dialects, 5 written translations with cultural context analysis, 5 oral presentations with etymological explanation, each test timed at exactly 15 minutes with no consultation, preparation, or external assistance. Any evidence of prior preparation, memorization, or deception will result in immediate disqualification and permanent academic censure. The examination materials arrive like weapons: stone tablets with undeciphered inscriptions, manuscript, fragments in dead scripts, audio recordings of endangered dialects spoken by the last native speakers before they died. Each test designed not to evaluate competence, but to expose fraud. The first test arrives with ceremony befitting an execution: a tablet of Akkadian cuneiform from 2400 BCE, one of humanity's earliest writing systems. The independent examiner, Dr. Patricia Morgan from Yale, explains with barely concealed anticipation of Maya's failure that this particular text has never been translated successfully despite 50 years of scholarly attention. Computer analysis suggests it might be administrative records, Dr. Morgan states, but the cultural context remains completely opaque. Previous translation attempts have yielded only fragments and speculation. Maya approaches the tablet, like she's greeting a dear friend after a long separation. Her fingers hover over the ancient wedge marks, and when she begins to speak, her voice carries 4,000 years of human storytelling with emotional depth that makes the room go silent. This is the personal journal of Farmer Enlil Asu from the city of Nipper, recorded in the 3rd year of King Hammurabi's reign. But it's not just an inventory. It's a love letter to a life he thought no one would remember. She continues, her translation becoming poetry. He lists his barley. Harvest, 42 bushels, enough to feed his family through winter. His sheep count, 17 ewes, 3 rams and twin lambs born during the spring flood. His debt to the temple, 6 silver shekels, which he promises to pay after the next market day. The room holds its breath as Maya reveals cultural details that no computer analysis has ever detected. But then he writes about his wife Ninhursagaya, who sings while grinding barley, whose voice makes the work feel like celebration. He complains that his neighbor Dumuzi's goats keep eating his vegetables, but admits the old man's stories are worth the stolen turnips. Dr. Morgan checks her reference materials frantically, her eyes widening with each detail. The personal names, the cultural references, the domestic details. This level of cultural context should be impossible without decades of specialized research. Maya's voice grows stronger. He ends by writing, "May whoever reads these words remember that Enlil Asu lived, loved his family, fought with his neighbors over vegetables and found joy in small things. May they know that even kings are forgotten, but a man who makes his wife laugh while she works will be remembered by the gods." The examination room falls completely silent. Dr. Morgan's voice comes out as a whisper. That cultural interpretation, it transforms our entire understanding of early Mesopotamian domestic life. How did you... Maya's answer carries the wisdom of someone who has learned to hear voices across millennia. Because some conversations transcend time, Dr. Morgan. Some hearts speak the same language across 4,000 years. By test 7, even the most skeptical examiners are running out of doubt. Maya has demonstrated fluency that tenured professors would envy, cultural knowledge that would take decades to acquire, intuitive understanding that seems to transcend normal human learning capacity, ancient Sumerian flows from her lips like poetry as she translates creation myths that reveal humanity's earliest philosophical questions. Extinct Etruscan reveals jokes that make the examiners laugh, despite themselves, humor that survived the fall of civilizations. Dead Celtic dialects sing with the voices of bards who told stories around fires that went cold 1,000 years ago, yet whose narratives still carry the rhythm of human longing. Dr. Hartwell watches her carefully constructed trap, failing with growing panic. This examination was designed to destroy Maya, not validate her. Each successful translation makes Dr. Hartwell look more incompetent, more threatened, more desperate. Professor Muller checks his notes frantically. The cognitive load she's demonstrating, it exceeds our models of human linguistic capacity. Either our understanding of brain function is fundamentally flawed or... Professor Dubois shakes her head in amazement. The cultural nuances she's explaining. I've spent 20 years studying medieval Celtic languages, and she's revealing connections I never imagined. But Maya isn't just translating, she's illuminating. She explains how ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics influenced early Hebrew scripts. She demonstrates how Sanskrit philosophical concepts shaped Greek logical structures. She reveals how Basque grammatical patterns preserve pre-Indo-European thought processes that challenge everything linguists thought they knew about European intellectual development. Languages aren't just communication systems, Maya explains. Between tests, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has lived inside linguistic evolution. They're archaeological layers of human consciousness. Each one preserves ways of thinking, feeling, and understanding the world that disappear when the language dies. That's when Dr. Hartwell springs her ultimate trap, the examination she's been saving for this moment, the test designed to expose Maya as either delusional or fraudulent. For the final examination, she announces with barely concealed malice and triumphant anticipation, we have something extraordinary, a text that has baffled linguists for over a century, resisted every attempt at translation, defeated the world's most sophisticated computational analysis. She produces photographs of stone inscriptions from the Indus Valley, symbols from a civilization so ancient that no living person has ever successfully decoded them. The Indus script remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, humanity's oldest undeciphered writing system. No Rosetta Stone exists, no bilingual texts, no cultural continuity, just mysterious symbols carved in stone by people whose voices have been silent for 4,000 years. Ms. Jefferson, if you're truly the linguistic prodigy you claim to be, surely you can read humanity's oldest undeciphered writing system? The room goes dead silent. Even Maya's supporters recognize this as an impossible test. The Indus Valley civilization vanished 4,000 years ago, taking their language with them. Every attempt at decipherment has failed. Computer analysis has yielded nothing. Linguistic archaeology has hit an absolute wall. Dr. Hartwell's trap is perfect. If Maya admits she can't read the Indus script, her entire demonstration is called into question. If she attempts a translation, she risks exposing herself as a fraud when no verification exists. If she succeeds, but success is impossible because no one has ever succeeded. Maya stares at the photographs, her confidence wavering for the first time all morning. The symbols look familiar somehow, not like something she studied, but like half-remembered dreams, patterns that tease the edge of recognition without quite materializing into meaning. Dr. Hartwell presses her advantage with surgical cruelty. Take your time, Ms. Jefferson. After all, if you can truly speak 29 languages, surely a 30th shouldn't present any difficulty. Unless, of course, your previous demonstrations were somehow prepared in advance. The trap is psychologically perfect. Every successful translation Maya has provided can now be reinterpreted as elaborate preparation rather than genuine ability. The Indus Valley script becomes the test that will either validate everything or destroy it all. Maya looks around. The room, at Dr. Hartwell's triumphant smirk, at the examiner's expectant faces, at Richard Callan's worried expression. The weight of 15 years of silence, the hope of recognition, the fear of destruction, all balanced on her ability to read symbols that no human being has successfully deciphered in 4 millennia. For a moment, she seems to shrink back into the invisible woman who spent 15 years emptying wastebaskets. The confident linguist who has been demonstrating impossible abilities all morning becomes the frightened janitor who knows she's about to be exposed as either delusional or fraudulent. Dr. Hartwell watches Maya's confidence crumble and knows she's won. "Ms. Jefferson, we're waiting. Can you read the Indus Valley script, or shall we conclude that your previous demonstrations were elaborate performance rather than authentic scholarship?" Maya stands at the crossroads of her entire life. She can admit defeat and return to invisibility, or attempt the impossible and risk everything on symbols that have defeated civilization's greatest minds. The room waits. The world holds its breath. Maya Jefferson faces the moment that will define not just her career, but her very identity. Maya Jefferson stands before the photographs of Indus Valley inscriptions like a detective examining evidence that everyone else has declared unsolvable. The silence in the room becomes suffocating as 40 brilliant minds wait to witness either the linguistic discovery of the century or the complete destruction of an elaborate fraud. But something unexpected happens. Instead of crumbling under pressure, Maya straightens her shoulders, looks directly at Dr. Hartwell, and speaks with quiet dignity that cuts through the academic hostility like light through darkness. "Dr. Hartwell, you're asking me to do something that no living person can do." The Indus Valley script remains undeciphered because the civilization that created it left us no cultural bridge, no connecting languages, no living descendants who remember their voices. Dr. Hartwell's smile widens with anticipated victory. "So you admit you cannot—" "I admit," Maya continues, her voice growing stronger with each word, "that I cannot prove what I'm about to tell you. But I can share what these symbols suggest to me, based on patterns I recognize from other ancient writing systems, connections that academic institutions have been too rigid to explore." The room holds its breath as Maya approaches the photographs, like an archaeologist approaching sacred artifacts. Her finger traces the air above the symbols with reverent precision. These aren't just inventory lists or religious texts. They're personal communications, messages between traders and their families, separated by dangerous journeys across ancient trade routes. This symbol here, she points to a recurring pattern. It appears in contexts that suggest longing, the ache of separation. This combination suggests temporal distance, until the rains come again or before the next harvest. Dr. Morgan leans forward despite herself, academic curiosity overriding skepticism. "What makes you think they're personal rather than administrative?" Maya's eyes grow distant, as if seeing across millennia. "Because that's what humans do when we're afraid we might be forgotten. We don't just document what we own. We document who we love. Business records survive because they're carved, in stone or written on durable materials. But the messages people really wanted to preserve, those were about connection, about hoping someone far away would remember them." She continues, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality. "This pattern here suggests a name, probably feminine based on grammatical structures I recognize from other proto-languages. And this combination, it feels like 'come home safely' or 'may the rivers guide you back to us.'" The examination room falls completely silent. Maya hasn't claimed to translate the untranslatable. She's offered something more profound. Insight into the human heart that beats beneath all languages, living or dead. Understanding that transcends decipherment and reaches toward empathy. Professor Mueller whispers, "The structural analysis. The grammatical assumptions. They're completely original but somehow convincing," Dr. Sharma adds quietly. She's not just looking at symbols, she's looking at human motivation behind symbol making. Maya steps back from the photographs, her voice carrying hard-won wisdom. "I can't prove these translations because the Indus Valley people took their voices with them when they left. But I can tell you what I hear in the silence between their symbols. The same longing, the same love, the same hope that echoes through every language I've ever learned. She looks directly at Dr. Hartwell. You wanted me to do the impossible to prove I'm authentic, but authenticity isn't about doing what no one else can do. It's about being honest about what you can and cannot know, while still offering what insights you have. The examination room erupts, not in condemnation but in recognition that they've witnessed something unprecedented. Not the solution to an ancient mystery, but a demonstration of intellectual honesty combined with profound cultural intuition that transcends traditional academic methodology. Dr. Echevarria stands up, tears in his eyes. This is what scholarship should be, not just decoding symbols, but understanding the human hearts that created them. Dr. Hartwell realizes her carefully laid trap has spectacularly backfired. Maya's response to the Indus Valley Challenge was too honest, too insightful, too profoundly human to dismiss as fraud. The examination designed to destroy her has instead elevated her to near mythical status in the eyes of international observers. But Elizabeth Hartwell didn't build her career on accepting defeat gracefully. If academic methodology can't destroy Maya Jefferson, then personal destruction must. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hartwell announces with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel, I think we've entertained this charade long enough. Before we allow ourselves to be completely swept away by what is admittedly an impressive performance, I believe we need to consider some background information that puts today's demonstrations in proper context. Maya's face goes pale. She knows what's coming, the nuclear option that academic predators always keep in reserve. I've done some research into Ms. Jefferson's background, and what I discovered is both illuminating and deeply troubling. Dr. Hartwell's voice carries the authority of someone about to deliver a killing blow. 15 years ago, Maya Jefferson was indeed an academic. Briefly, she was dismissed from Northwestern University for severe academic misconduct, specifically for fabricating research data in her doctoral dissertation, falsifying source materials, and presenting fraudulent linguistic connections that could not be verified by peer review. The room erupts in whispers and shocked murmurs. The international delegates look confused and betrayed, their wonder at Maya's abilities now contaminated by accusations of previous deception. Even Dr. Echevarria seems shaken by this revelation, his protective stance wavering. Dr. Hartwell continues her systematic destruction. Her degree was revoked, her publications retracted, and she was effectively banned from academic employment at any reputable institution. What we witnessed today wasn't brilliant scholarship. It was an elaborate performance by someone with a documented history of deception and a 15-year grudge against the academic establishment that rightfully rejected her fraudulent work. Professor Chen joins the attack, his earlier embarrassment now transformed into righteous indignation. This explains everything. The supposed fluency, the cultural insights, the impossible linguistic range. It's all been carefully prepared for exactly this scenario. She's had 15 years to plan this revenge performance. Dr. Hartwell delivers the psychological coup de grace. What we're dealing with isn't a hidden genius finally receiving recognition. It's a deeply disturbed individual whose psychological need for academic validation has driven her to create an elaborate fantasy of expertise. The question isn't whether she can speak 29 languages. It's whether we're witnessing calculated deception or psychiatric delusion. Maya stands frozen as her entire life is dissected and reinterpreted through the lens of past shame. The truth is infinitely more complex than Dr. Hartwell's version. Academic politics, racial bias, institutional protection of senior faculty, research suppression. But who will listen to nuances when the basic facts support condemnation? Richard Callan steps forward, his voice carrying the weight of a man whose reputation is crumbling in real time. Ms. Jefferson, is this true? Were you dismissed from Northwestern for academic misconduct? Maya's voice comes out as barely a whisper. Yes, for fabricating research data. That's what they said. Dr. Hartwell drives the final nail into Maya's professional coffin. So we have a disgraced former academic, working as a janitor, who happens to have memorized enough linguistic fragments to fool international delegates for exactly long enough to create this spectacle. The only remaining question is whether this is elaborate delusion driven by psychological trauma or calculated deception designed to destroy this institution's reputation. Maya looks around the room at 40 faces that have shifted from wonder to suspicion to outright hostility and disgust. 15 years of rebuilding her sense of self, shattered in 15 minutes of character assassination. The scholars who were mesmerized by her abilities 20 minutes ago now seem embarrassed by their own gullibility, angry at being fooled by someone they now view as mentally unstable or criminally deceptive. Dr. Nakamura whispers to his colleague, "Was she deceiving us all along?" Professor Alzara shakes her head. This confirms that the West cannot be trusted with anything. For a moment, it seems like she might break completely under the weight of public humiliation, might flee back to her cart and her shadows and her safe invisibility where past failures can't be weaponized against present abilities. The woman, who just demonstrated impossible linguistic competence, becomes the wounded janitor again, overwhelmed by shame that she thought she had conquered, but that has been lying dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy her. Richard Callan faces his own moment of truth. Support Maya and risk his reputation being destroyed alongside hers, or abandon her to protect his $50 million deal and international standing. His legal advisors would counsel immediate distance. His investors would demand he cut ties. His survival instincts scream for self-preservation. But something in Maya's expression, not guilt, but the particular kind of devastation that comes from having your truth dismissed by people who profit from your silence, makes him pause. Maya Jefferson looks around the room at 40 faces that have already convicted her in the court of academic opinion, at Dr. Hartwell's satisfied smirk, at Richard Callan's conflicted expression, at international delegates who feel betrayed and manipulated, at colleagues who never saw her as fully human to begin with, and then, for the first time in 15 years, she decides to tell her complete story, not the sanitized version that might gain sympathy, but the raw, complex, politically dangerous truth that destroyed her career and forced her into invisible exile. You want the truth about Northwestern? Here it is in all of it. Every ugly detail that your comfortable academic narrative conveniently ignores. Her voice grows stronger with each word. 15 years of suppressed anger and injustice finally finding voice. I was a 28-year-old assistant professor who made a discovery that threatened the entire foundation of American linguistic scholarship. I found systematic connections between African language families and Proto-Indo-European roots that suggested a completely different model of human linguistic evolution, one that placed African civilizations at the center of language development rather than as peripheral afterthoughts. My research proved that languages you've classified as primitive actually preserve grammatical structures and philosophical concepts that predate and influence everything you consider classical. I demonstrated that your entire academic genealogy, the story you tell about how human languages developed, is incomplete, politically motivated and systematically racist. Dr. Hartwell interrupts desperately. These are the paranoid fantasies of, I'm not finished. Maya's voice cuts through the interruption like a blade forged in 15 years of silence. My department head, Dr. Martin Ashford, told me to abandon the research. He said it was politically sensitive and academically dangerous. When I asked what he meant, he explained that my conclusions would complicate funding relationships with European institutions and create unnecessary controversy in an already sensitive field. When I refused to suppress my research, he systematically destroyed me. He organized a whisper campaign questioning my methodology, my integrity, my mental stability. He convinced peer reviewers to reject my work without reading it. He blocked my access to essential research materials. He poisoned my relationships with other faculty members. The room grows uncomfortable as Maya reveals the machinery of academic destruction. The university gave me a choice: retract my research, accept that African linguistic contributions don't exist, publish a formal apology for methodological errors, and accept a teaching-only position with no research privileges, or face formal misconduct charges that would end my career permanently. I chose to fight, and I lost. Not because my research was wrong. 15 years later, independent, scholars in Africa, Asia, and South America have confirmed everything I found. I lost because I was a young black woman challenging the work of powerful white men who controlled not just my career, but the entire narrative of human linguistic development. Maya looks directly at the international delegates. Dr. Etseberia, the Basque linguistic patterns I demonstrated today, they support my original research. Ancient Basque preserves pre-Indo-European structures that connect to African language families in ways that your European scholars have refused to acknowledge for a century. She turns to Dr. Alzara. Professor Alzara, the Arabic cultural contexts I explained, they reveal how African philosophical concepts shaped Islamic scholarship in ways that American universities systematically ignore because it complicates their narrative of European intellectual supremacy. For 15 years, I cleaned these halls, listening to mediocre scholars discuss languages I understand better than they ever will. I stayed silent because I believed their judgment of me. I accepted their version of my worth. I let them convince me that institutional rejection meant intellectual failure. Maya's voice becomes transcendent. But today, speaking those languages again, demonstrating knowledge that no amount of academic politics can diminish, I remember something crucial. Truth doesn't need institutional approval. Knowledge doesn't require the permission of people who profit from ignorance, and wisdom doesn't depend on the validation of systems designed to suppress it. She looks directly at Dr. Hartwell. You wanted proof of my abilities. Here it is. I can speak to ancestors whose voices you've silenced. I can translate texts that expose the limitations of your cultural understanding. I can build bridges between civilizations that your institutions keep separated to maintain power structures that benefit you. The room falls into stunned silence. This isn't just personal vindication. It's a systematic indictment of academic racism, intellectual colonialism, and institutional protection of comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. The conference room buzzes with conflicted energy as Maya's devastating truth-telling reverberates through 40 brilliant minds who are suddenly forced to confront uncomfortable realities about their own academic institutions and assumptions. Dr. Etseberia is the first to break the stunned silence. He stands slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose entire worldview has just shifted. Ms. Jefferson, the connections you described between ancient Basque and African language families, these are patterns our own researchers have noticed but been discouraged from pursuing by European funding bodies. Professor Alzara rises next, her voice thoughtful and measured. The Arabic linguistic analysis you provided today revealed cultural knowledge that suggests extensive study of North African and West African Islamic scholarship that most American universities systematically exclude from their curricula. Dr. Nakamura adds quietly, in Japan we have similar experiences with Western institutions dismissing Asian linguistic contributions to human development. The patterns you describe, they match what we've found in our own suppressed research. Dr. Morgan from Yale, who had been part of the examination panel, speaks with growing realization. The methodology you described, connecting language families across continents, it's exactly what computational linguistics is starting to prove through AI analysis, but funding for that research keeps getting blocked by established interests. Richard Callan, who has been silent during Maya's revelation, finally speaks. Ms. Jefferson, are you saying that your original research from 15 years ago has been independently verified by other scholars? Maya's voice carries quiet authority. Mr. Callan, my research has been confirmed by linguists in 17 countries, but most of them can't publish in American or European journals because peer review is controlled by the same people who destroyed my career. Dr. Etseberia's voice grows stronger. This explains why UNESCO has had so much difficulty getting American institutions to acknowledge indigenous linguistic contributions to global language development. The resistance wasn't academic, it was political. Professor Alzara nods. And why Middle Eastern universities have stopped collaborating with certain Western institutions. We were told our research methodologies were culturally biased when we emphasized African and Asian linguistic influences. But Dr. Hartwell isn't finished. Her career, her reputation, her entire academic identity depends on destroying Maya's credibility. Ladies and gentlemen, we're listening to conspiracy, theories and paranoid fantasies. Academic standards exist for good reasons. Quality control matters. Peer review prevents exactly this kind of... Dr. Exaberia interrupts her. Dr. Hartwell, I've spent today listening to Ms. Jefferson demonstrate cultural knowledge of my own heritage that exceeds what most Basque scholars possess. Either she's the most elaborate fraud in academic history, or she's been systematically excluded from recognition for 15 years. Professor Al-Zahra adds, the Arabic translations she provided today would take our best scholars months to achieve. The cultural contexts, she explained, reveal knowledge that can't be memorized or faked. Dr. Nakamura speaks with quiet authority. In cognitive science, we're discovering that human linguistic capacity far exceeds traditional academic models. Ms. Jefferson may represent what's possible when learning happens outside institutional constraints. Richard Callan realizes he's witnessing something unprecedented, not just individual vindication, but a potential revolution in how linguistic scholarship acknowledges diverse cultural contributions. His business instincts recognize that Maya represents not just talent, but transformation of entire academic markets. But supporting her means challenging established academic powers that control funding, publications, and institutional partnerships worldwide. Just as the room begins to polarize between Maya's growing international support and Dr. Hartwell's desperate institutional defense, the conference room doors open unexpectedly. An elderly woman enters, walking with the deliberate pace of someone whose age has earned her the right to interrupt important meetings. She's small, probably in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that carry the particular intensity of someone who has spent decades in academic trenches. Richard Callan looks confused. Ma'am, this is a private examination. If you're looking for... I'm looking for Maya Jefferson, the woman says, her voice carrying an accent that suggests Eastern European origins and unassailable academic authority. My name is Dr. Elena Kowalski. I'm Professor Emeritus of Comparative Linguistics at University of Chicago, and I have something to say about Ms. Jefferson's research. Dr. Hartwell's face goes pale. Dr. Elena Kowalski is a legend in linguistic circles, author of foundational texts, recipient of international awards, a scholar whose reputation is unassailable. Her presence transforms the entire dynamic of the room. Dr. Kowalski, Dr. Hartwell stammers, we weren't expecting. How did you know about today's examination? Dr. Exaberia called me this morning. He described what he witnessed and asked if I knew anything about Maya Jefferson's background. Dr. Kowalski's eyes find Maya across the room. I've been waiting 15 years to tell this story. Maya stares at the elderly professor with growing recognition and something close to terror. Dr. Kowalski represents the academic establishment that destroyed her, but also potentially validation that could restore everything. Dr. Kowalski continues, in 2009, I was asked to serve as an external reviewer for a doctoral dissertation at Northwestern University. The research was extraordinary. It challenged 50 years of established linguistic genealogy, with evidence so compelling that it demanded complete revision of how we understand human language development. The methodology was flawless. The sources were impeccable. The conclusions were revolutionary. I recommended immediate publication and academic recognition for what was clearly breakthrough research that would reshape the field. Dr. Hartwell interrupts desperately. Dr. Kowalski, surely you remember that the research was found to be fabricated, fraudulent, academically unsound. Dr. Kowalski's voice carries the authority of someone whose integrity has never been questioned. That's what I was told after I submitted my review. I was informed that subsequent analysis had revealed methodological problems that required the research to be rejected. But I kept copies of everything. The original dissertation, my detailed review, my correspondence with Northwestern's review committee, and 15 years later, When computational linguistics and international collaborative research began proving exactly what that young scholar had discovered, I realized what had happened. The room falls completely silent as Dr. Kowalski delivers her bombshell. Maya Jefferson's research wasn't rejected because it was wrong. It was suppressed because it was right in ways that threatened academic careers, institutional funding, and the comfortable narrative that places European linguistic development at the center of human communication evolution. I've spent 15 years watching African, Asian, and indigenous scholars independently confirm every major conclusion in Ms. Jefferson's original dissertation. Her work on Proto-Indo-European connections to African language families is now considered foundational by linguists outside the American and European academic establishment. Dr. Kowalski's voice grows stronger. When Dr. Echeverria described her linguistic demonstrations today, I recognized the patterns of someone whose research was suppressed, not someone whose abilities were fabricated. Maya stands frozen, unable to process that her academic nightmare is finally being exposed by someone whose reputation makes denial impossible. Dr. Kowalski approaches her directly. Ms. Jefferson, I owe you an apology. I should have fought harder when your research was suppressed. I should have exposed the politics that destroyed your career. I should have spoken up 15 years ago. The international delegates look stunned. Dr. Echeverria rises. Dr. Kowalski, are you saying that Ms. Jefferson's original research has been validated by independent scholars? Not just validated, it's become foundational for linguistic research outside Western academic institutions. She was 15 years ahead of where the field is finally moving. Dr. Hartwell makes one last desperate attempt. Dr. Kowalski, with all due respect, memory can be unreliable after 15 years, which is why I brought documentation. Dr. Kowalski produces a thick folder. Copies of the original dissertation, my review, correspondence proving the suppression, and letters from 37 international linguists confirming that Maya Jefferson's research has revolutionized how we understand human language development. The room erupts as the implications sink in. Maya Jefferson isn't a fraud or a delusional janitor. She's a brilliant scholar whose career was destroyed by academic politics and whose vindication has been 15 years in the making. The conference room buzzes with the energy of a revelation that has shifted the entire landscape of the day. Dr. Kowalski's testimony has transformed Maya from suspected fraud to vindicated genius, from institutional embarrassment to academic martyr whose suppressed research has shaped international linguistic development for 15 years. Richard Callan recognizes the moment for what it is, not just personal vindication for Maya, but a potential revolution in how his institute approaches linguistic research and international collaboration. The business opportunity is staggering. Maya represents access to suppressed research, international academic networks, and revolutionary approaches to language study that could establish his institute as the premier linguistic research center in the world. Ms. Jefferson, Richard says, his voice carrying the weight of momentous decision, I'm prepared to offer you Dr. Hartwell's position as Director of Ancient Languages with a starting salary of $300,000, full research support, unlimited funding, for international collaboration, and complete academic freedom to pursue any research directions you choose. The offer hangs in the air like a lifeline thrown to someone who has been drowning for 15 years. Dr. Hartwell stares in shock, not just at being fired, but at being replaced by the woman she tried to destroy. But Maya's answer surprises everyone in the room. Mr. Callan, I appreciate your offer, but I don't want Dr. Hartwell's job. I don't want to become part of the same system that destroyed me once and could destroy me again. Richard looks confused. Then what do you want? Maya looks around the room at 40 faces representing the international linguistic establishment, brilliant minds constrained by institutional politics, innovative researchers limited by funding structures, passionate scholars trapped in academic hierarchies that prioritize credentials over competence. I want to create something completely different, something that serves people instead of institutions, something that builds bridges instead of defending territories. Her vision unfolds like a blueprint for academic revolution. I want to create a global community language institute, not another university department, but a network of scholar practitioners who take linguistic knowledge directly to the communities that need it most. Every day I see immigrants struggling to navigate legal systems in languages they barely speak. I see elderly people whose cultural languages are dying with them because no one creates preservation programs. I see indigenous communities disconnected from their linguistic heritage because universities study their languages but never teach them back to the people. Maya's voice grows with passion. I want to hire scholars like me, brilliant minds who've been pushed out of traditional institutions for challenging orthodoxy, asking uncomfortable questions, or pursuing research that threatens established hierarchies. Give me the resources to create something revolutionary. Refugee linguists who become cultural bridge builders, elderly speakers who become preservation specialists, indigenous knowledge keepers who become research partners, rather than research subjects, academic exiles who become educational innovators. Dr. Echeberria nods approvingly. Community-based linguistic scholarship rather than institution-based research extraction. Exactly. Languages as living connections between people, not museum artifacts for academic study. Richard Callan sees the business and social potential immediately. A program like that could revolutionize immigrant services, cultural preservation, international communication, but it would require significant funding and complete independence from traditional academic structures. Maya continues, and I want to work with the international scholars in this room, not as visiting professors at American institutions, but as equal partners in research networks that respect every cultural perspective on language development. Professor Al-Zahra speaks up. The Middle Eastern universities I represent would support such collaboration. We've been waiting for American institutions willing to treat us as partners rather than subjects. Dr. Nakamura adds, Asian linguistic. Research networks would welcome genuine collaboration with someone who understands how academic politics has suppressed diverse perspectives. Give me $15 million, complete operational independence, and partnership agreements with international institutions that have been excluded from American academic circles. I'll show you what happens when linguistic scholarship serves human connection instead of institutional prestige. The room falls silent as everyone processes the magnitude of what Maya is proposing. Not just personal career restoration, but transformation of how linguistic knowledge is developed, shared, and applied globally. Richard Callan faces the decision that will define not just Maya's future, but the future of his entire enterprise. Richard Callan looks around the room at the faces of international delegates, vindicated scholar, and academic establishment in crisis. His business instincts, honed by decades of identifying revolutionary opportunities, tell him he's witnessing the birth of something that could transform not just linguistic research but global education itself. Ms. Jefferson, he says slowly, you're proposing to completely reimagine how linguistic scholarship functions in the modern world. I'm proposing that we stop studying people's languages and start serving the people who speak them. Maya responds with quiet authority. Richard makes the decision that will define his legacy: $15 million, complete operational independence, international partnership support, and the Global Community Language Institute becomes the flagship program of our organization. The room erupts in surprise and excited conversation. Dr. Hartwell stares, in shock as her academic world collapses and reforms around her. The international delegates begin discussing collaboration possibilities that have been impossible under traditional American academic structures. But Dr. Hartwell isn't finished. Her career, her identity, her entire sense of self depends on preventing Maya's success. Richard, you're making a catastrophic mistake. This woman has no administrative experience, no institutional credentials, no track record of managing large programs. She has 15 years of experience that your institutions don't teach, Dr. Kowalski interrupts firmly. She's learned to do more with less, to create knowledge networks without institutional support, to maintain expertise while being systematically excluded from recognition. Maya looks at Dr. Hartwell with something unexpected, not triumph but understanding. Elizabeth, I know you're afraid. Change threatens everything you've built your identity around, but there's room for everyone in what I'm creating, if you're willing to learn instead of control. Dr. Hartwell's response reveals the depth of her institutional conditioning. I've spent 30 years building academic standards, maintaining quality control, protecting linguistic scholarship from people like me, Maya finishes gently. From perspectives that don't fit your frameworks, from knowledge that develops outside your approval systems. But Elizabeth, what if protection and connection aren't opposites? What if maintaining standards and welcoming diverse voices can happen simultaneously? What if the quality control you're defending is actually limiting the quality of knowledge? We can create. The room watches this exchange with fascination, vindicated victim offering grace and partnership to the person who tried to destroy her. Dr. Etzeberria stands up. Ms. Jefferson, the Basque Cultural Foundation would like to be your first international partner. We've been waiting for someone who understands that cultural preservation requires community engagement, not just academic documentation. Professor Alzara follows. The Association of Middle Eastern Linguistic Institutions would welcome partnership with scholars who respect our research methodologies and cultural perspectives. Dr. Nakamura adds, Asian universities have resources and knowledge that could support community-based language preservation globally. Maya sees her impossible dream becoming possible reality. Within 6 months, we'll have community language programs operating in 12 cities. Refugee scholars will be teaching their heritage languages to second-generation immigrants. Elderly speakers will be preserving cultural knowledge through intergenerational teaching partnerships. Indigenous communities will be revitalizing dormant languages through community-controlled education programs. Richard Callan realizes he's witnessing more than business opportunity. He's seeing the birth of a movement that could transform how knowledge serves human connection. Maya, what you're describing could influence international education policy, immigration services, cultural preservation efforts worldwide. Maya's voice carries the wisdom of someone who has learned to see beyond personal vindication. Richard, I spent 15 years invisible because I thought recognition had to come from institutions, but the most important recognition comes from the people whose lives you serve. 2 years later, Maya Jefferson sits in a circle with her most advanced students in the rooftop garden of the Global Community Language Institute, now an independent organization that has expanded to 12 cities across North America. The Chicago skyline stretches before them, but their attention is focused inward, on the magic happening in the space between languages and cultures. Today's class is special, not a lesson, but a celebration. Each student will share something from their heritage language that cannot be translated, only experienced. These are Maya's living bridges, people who've learned that language is medicine, not just communication. Mrs. Chen Wei-Ming begins, her weathered hands gesturing expressively. In Mandarin, we have a concept that means a relationship determined by fate, not just coincidence, but the invisible threads that connect people who are meant to find each other. She looks at Maya with eyes that sparkle with newfound confidence. I think fate brought me to your classroom 2 years ago when I was just a lonely widow who thought her Chinese stories didn't matter to her American grandchildren. Dr. Ahmad Hassan follows, his voice carrying the melody of someone who has rediscovered his voice. In Arabic, we have a phrase that means, "O Lord, give me patience." But it's not asking for strength to endure difficulty. It's asking for the wisdom to understand that everything has its time, and rushing rarely leads to beauty. His eyes reflect the journey from refugee trauma to community leader. Maya taught me that my languages weren't baggage from a painful past. They were bridges to healing. Jennifer Two-Bears speaks first in Cherokee, her words flowing like water over stones, then translates, I said, the wind carries stories that the ground remembers. In Cherokee, we don't separate past and present the way English does. My grandmother's words are still being spoken by the wind today. Around the circle they go, 17 students sharing untranslatable treasures from languages that span continents and centuries. Each word is a gift, each concept a bridge, between worlds that seemed impossibly separate just 2 years ago. But these aren't just students anymore. They're cultural ambassadors, family healers, community bridges. Mrs. Chen now leads Saturday morning Mandarin classes for mixed-race families, helping children connect with grandparents they'd never been able to talk to. Dr. Hassan runs support groups for Middle Eastern refugees, helping them process trauma through poetry in their native languages. Jennifer has partnered with Chicago Public Schools to create the first Cherokee language immersion program in an urban setting. Maya listens with the deep attention she once reserved for ancient texts, understanding that she's witnessing something more precious than academic scholarship, the living transmission of human wisdom across cultures and generations. When the sharing circle ends, Maria Santos, a grandmother who now runs weekend language programs for Latino families throughout Chicago, asks the question that hangs in the evening air. Teacher Maya, what word from your heritage means the most to you now? Maya considers this carefully. Her heritage is complex. African-American roots complicated by centuries of cultural disruption, academic training that both elevated and betrayed her. 15 years of invisibility that became their own form of wisdom. Finally, she speaks. There's a phrase in Gula, the language my great-grandmother spoke before the world told her to be ashamed of it. Everyone knows it as a song, but they don't know what it really means. She pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle. It means, come by here. It's not just a plea, it's an invitation. Come by here, whoever you are, wherever you've been, whatever language you speak. Come by here and be seen. That's what this program is, what this community is. One long invitation for every voice to come by here and be heard, every story to be valued, every language to find its home. The circle sits in comfortable silence as the sun sets over Chicago. 17 people from different continents united by the understanding that language is love made audible. That evening, Maya sits at her desk writing a letter by hand, not an email, not a text, but carefully formed words on paper, the way people communicated before digital distances made everything faster and less personal. Dear Elena, you asked me once what I learned from those 15 years of being invisible. I've been thinking about your question for months now, and I finally know the answer. I learned that silence and invisibility aren't the same thing. I was silent, but I was never invisible. Not to the languages that spoke to me in empty libraries, not to the stories that whispered from ancient pages, not to the part of myself that refused to stop learning even when the world stopped listening. Learned that shame is just fear wearing academic robes. For 15 years I was ashamed of being dismissed, ashamed of being just a janitor, ashamed of knowing things I couldn't prove in ways institutions would accept. But shame and truth aren't related. Truth exists whether or not it's credentialed. I learned that the most important conversations happen between people who speak different languages but share the same heart. My students teach me more than I teach them because they bring their whole selves to learning, not just their minds but their memories, their losses, their hopes for their children and grandchildren. Most importantly, I learned that being forgotten by the world isn't the same as being forgotten by the universe. Languages found me when people couldn't see me. Stories trusted me when institutions rejected me. Knowledge chose me when careers abandoned me. The woman who was destroyed at Northwestern had to die for the woman who teaches in community. Centers to be born. I'm grateful for both versions of myself, the one who believed in other people's definitions of success, and the one who learned to define success as the ability to help others find their voices. Come visit soon. I want to teach you some words that don't exist in English. I want to share the language our great-grandmother spoke before the world convinced her to be ashamed. I want to show you what happens when you stop hiding your light under someone. Kelsey's expectations or my love Mayapes. I still speak 29 languages, but now I also speak the most important one, the language of not giving up on yourself. On a quiet Sunday morning, Maya returns to Northwestern University for the first time in 16 years. She's not here for vindication or confrontation. She's here for closure. The campus looks different but feels the same. Gothic buildings that once represented intellectual sanctuary, now just stone and mortar holding complicated memories. She walks across the quad, where she once believed her future would unfold according to academic plans that never accounted for the politics of knowledge. Maya carries a small wooden box, carved by one of her students, a refugee from Honduras, who learned woodworking from his grandfather and English from Maya's program. Inside the box are two items: her original research notes from the work that led to her dismissal and a copy of her MacArthur Fellowship certificate. Yes, the call had come 3 months ago, recognizing her exceptional creativity in bridging, linguistic scholarship and community service. She finds the tree where she used to sit and prepare lectures, back when she believed that truth and institutional recognition were the same thing. 16 years ago, she sat under this same tree and made the decision to fight the misconduct charges, rather than accept quiet dismissal. Today, she sits here again and makes a different choice. Maya opens the wooden box and removes her original research notes, 15 years of work that academic politics declared worthless, theories that connected African linguistic families to Indo-European roots in ways that threatened established narratives. But instead of burning them or burying them, she does something unexpected. She carefully places them back in the box alongside her MacArthur certificate. "You were both necessary," she says to the papers. The work that was rejected and the work that was celebrated, the woman who was silenced and the woman who found her voice. You're all part of the same story. Maya closes the box and holds it for a long moment. Then she stands, brushes dirt from her dress and walks back toward her car. She doesn't bury the past or burn it or banish it. She carries it with her, not as shame, but as proof that surviving broken institutions can make you strong enough to build better ones. 3 years after that transformative morning in the Institute's conference room, Maya Jefferson receives an invitation that would have seemed impossible during her invisible years. Northwestern University wants to offer her an endowed chair in community linguistics, a position they're creating specifically for her groundbreaking work. The irony isn't lost on her. The institution that destroyed her career now wants to claim her success. Maya sits in her sunny office at the Global Community Language Institute, now operating in 24 cities across 3 countries, reading the formal invitation. The salary would be substantial, the prestige significant, the academic validation complete. Her assistant, Mrs. Chen Wei-Ming, now fluent in English and teaching Mandarin to mixed-race families across Chicago, brings her afternoon tea. "Important letter?" Mrs. Chen asks, her English now confident and clear. "Northwestern University wants me to come back as a professor." Mrs. Chen raises her eyebrows. "The place that hurt you?" Maya nods. "The same place." "What will you tell them?" Maya looks around her office, walls covered with thank you letters in 37 languages, photographs of students who've reconnected with their heritage, drawings from children who've learned to speak with their grandparents for the first time. She thinks about Tuesday evening classes where refugees become teachers, Saturday morning sessions where teenagers learn words their great-grandparents spoke, Sunday afternoon circles where elders share untranslatable wisdom with anyone willing to listen. Maya picks up her pen and writes her response by hand. "Dear Northwestern University Committee, thank you for your invitation to join your faculty. I'm honored that you recognize the value of community linguistics as an academic discipline. However, I must respectfully decline. My work belongs not in university buildings, but in community centers, refugee resettlement offices, and neighborhood libraries where people gather to heal the gaps between generations. 16 years ago, you taught me that institutional approval and meaningful work aren't always the same thing. I've learned that lesson well. I wish you success in finding someone who shares your vision of academic excellence. I'll continue pursuing my own vision of educational healing. Sincerely, Maya." Jefferson founder and director, Global Community Language Institute MacArthur Fellow. 5 years later, The Global Community Language Institute has become a model replicated in 73 cities across 6 continents. Maya's methodology, treating languages as cultural medicine rather than academic subjects, has influenced policy at UNESCO, inspired legislation supporting heritage language preservation, and created a network of community educators who might never have found their voices in traditional institutions. But the statistics that matter most to Maya aren't in policy papers or academic journals. They're in the small moments. 15,000 children who can now speak with their grandparents in shared languages, 2,400 elderly immigrants who've become volunteer teachers, transforming from invisible to essential in single semesters, 850 refugees who've processed trauma by sharing their stories in languages that carry emotional nuances English cannot hold, 127 tribal communities that have revitalized dormant dialects through intergenerational teaching circles, and one former janitor who learned that brilliance doesn't expire with age, wisdom doesn't require credentials, and the most important conversations happen between people who choose to see each other as fully human. Maya still lives in the same apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, but now the view includes something new. A small plaque on the building next door marking it as a UNESCO Heritage Language Learning Site, the first of its kind in the United States. Every evening she still sits by her window reading books in ancient languages. But now she's not reading alone. She's preparing for tomorrow's classes, choosing words that will help someone's grandchild speak to someone's grandmother, selecting stories that will remind someone that their culture's voice matters. The books that once whispered to her in solitude now sing through the voices of hundreds of students who carry their heritage languages like torches through the darkness of cultural forgetting. 10 years after that life-changing morning, Maya Jefferson stands before her largest audience ever, not in an academic conference room, but in Chicago's Millennium Park, addressing 8,000 people gathered for the International Day of Linguistic Diversity. The crowd is beautifully diverse. Elderly immigrants holding hands with American-born grandchildren, refugees who've become community leaders, former academics who've found purpose beyond university walls, and hundreds of students whose lives have been transformed by the simple recognition that their heritage languages matter. Maya begins not with credentials or accomplishments, but with a question that has guided her entire journey. How many of you have ever felt invisible? Not just ignored, truly invisible, as if your knowledge, your experience, your very existence didn't register in the world around you. Hands rise throughout the crowd, young and old, every ethnicity, every background. The universality of invisibility connects them all. I spent 15 years believing that visibility required permission from people who had never lived my experience. I thought recognition meant acceptance by institutions that had already decided I didn't belong. I believed that my worth depended on other people's ability to see me. Maya pauses, looking out over faces that mirror her own journey from invisibility to recognition. But here's what 15 years of emptying wastebaskets taught me. You are not invisible because others cannot see you. You are invisible because you have forgotten how to see yourself. The crowd leans forward, sensing something profound. Approaching, every language I learned during those silent years was an act of self-recognition. Every ancient text I translated was a conversation with my own hidden brilliance. Every word I whispered in empty libraries was practice for the day I would finally speak loudly enough for the world to hear. Maya's voice carries across the park like a blessing. Your knowledge doesn't need institutional approval. Your wisdom doesn't require academic credentials. Your voice doesn't depend on other people's permission to matter. She looks directly into the faces of elderly women in the front rows, women who've spent lifetimes making themselves smaller to fit other people's expectations. To every woman who has ever been told she's too old to learn something new, you are not too old. The languages you want to speak are not too difficult. The dreams you thought you had to abandon are not too late. To every person who has ever felt that their culture, their accent, their way of knowing the world was somehow less valuable than someone else's, you are not less. You are not broken. You do not need fixing. You need recognition, starting with your own. The crowd is completely silent, hanging on every word. I learned 29 languages not because I was extraordinary, but because I was determined not to let the world's blindness become my own. I refused to let other people's limitations become my ceiling. I chose to stay curious instead, of bitter, to keep learning instead of surrendering. Maya's voice carries the weight of 10 years of transformation. The most radical act you can commit in a world that profits from your invisibility is to insist on being fully, brilliantly, unapologetically seen. As Maya concludes her speech to a standing ovation that lasts 8 minutes, something extraordinary happens. People in the crowd begin calling out "thank you" in dozens of languages: Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, Cherokee, Somali, Polish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Swahili, creating a symphony of gratitude that spans continents and generations. But Maya's attention is drawn to a small group near the stage, her original students from that first community class. Now teachers and advocates themselves, Mrs. Chen Wei-Ming, now 82, who leads intergenerational language programs throughout Chicago and has been featured in documentaries about cultural preservation. Dr. Ahmad Hassan, who opened the first trilingual trauma counseling center for refugees and now trains therapists internationally. Jennifer Tubears, whose Cherokee immersion program has become a model for indigenous language revitalization nationwide. As the crowd begins to disperse into smaller conversation circles, exactly as Maya had hoped, strangers becoming friends. Through shared stories in multiple languages, a young journalist approaches with the question she's been asked countless times over the past decade. Ms. Jefferson, what do you consider your greatest achievement? Maya thinks for a moment, watching her former students embrace their own students, seeing the ripple effects of recognition spreading through generations like light through water. My greatest achievement isn't speaking 29 languages, she says finally. It's learning to speak the 30th, the language of not giving up on yourself. The journalist presses, "Can you elaborate?" Maya smiles, her eyes reflecting 10 years of hard-won peace. For most of my life, I spoke every language except the one that mattered most. The language that says, "I am enough, exactly as I am." Right now, that's the language that changes everything. That's the language that makes all the others possible. As evening falls over Chicago, Maya finds herself back where her story began, walking through the Global Language Research Institute, now renamed the Maya Jefferson Center for Community Linguistics. She passes conference rooms where she once was dismissed as impossible, through halls where she once pushed a cleaning cart in invisible silence. But tonight, these same halls buzz with evening classes, elderly Polish women teaching neighborhood children folk songs, Somali teenagers helping their parents navigate college applications, Vietnamese grandmothers sharing recipes that exist only in their native language because the ingredients and cooking methods don't translate to English. Maya pauses at the memorial wall installed in the main lobby, photographs and quotes from community members whose heritage languages have been preserved through the program. At the center is a quote in 29 languages, all saying the same thing. Every voice matters. But it's the newest addition that makes Maya smile. A child's drawing of a woman surrounded by floating words in different alphabets, with the caption, "Teacher." Maya shows us that words are bridges to everywhere. Maya sits on the bench beneath this wall and opens a worn notebook, the same journal where she first started tracking linguistic patterns 15 years ago as a disgraced academic working night shifts. The pages are fuller now, not just with language notes, but with names, stories, connections, lives transformed. She writes one final entry. Today I spoke to 8,000 people in my native language, the language of possibility. I told them what I learned in the silence, that invisibility is not a condition imposed by others, but a choice we can unmake every day. I learned 29 languages to prove I was smart enough to be seen, but I only needed to learn one language to prove I was brave enough to be myself, the language of refusing to disappear. As Maya closes the notebook and prepares to leave, her phone buzzes with a message from Elena, her sister in California. Saw your speech online? Great-grandma would be proud. When can you teach me some of those words that don't exist in English? Maya types back. Come by here any time, we've got room for every voice. She stands, turns off the lights, and walks toward the exit. But instead of walking into darkness, she walks toward the bright evening streets of Chicago, where dozens of languages create the soundtrack of a city learning to listen to all its voices. Maya Jefferson's story doesn't end with recognition, or awards or institutional validation. It ends with something more valuable, the knowledge that brilliance doesn't have an expiration date, wisdom doesn't require permission, and the most extraordinary conversations happen when we stop hiding our light and start sharing it. Maya Jefferson's incredible journey proves that it's never too late to reclaim your voice and transform your life. From invisible janitor to celebrated educator, she showed us that brilliance has no expiration date. If Maya's story inspired, you hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who refuse to stay invisible. Ring the notification bell so you never miss these life-changing tales. Remember, your story matters, your voice counts, and it's never too late to shine.